All right. Welcome to the second webinar on college admissions. My name is Hamada. I'm going to introduce myself shortly, and I want to use this time and this webinar to really cover as many of these really important, critical topics for college admissions, especially in terms of what's going on now in the college admissions space. So let's get busy. We got a lot to cover today. And I just had my coffee, so I am rumbling and ready to rock and roll. And please, a couple of quick things, some housekeeping rules. Make sure to add comments constantly. And my colleague will also look at those, suss them out, let me know so that I can answer your questions in real time. Now, as you guys are seeing right here, the webinar we're going to be covering today is preparing for an uncertain college admissions reality. And that is very true. We have no idea how things are progressing in the college admissions space. There's so many variables, so many things happening nationally, on the state level, and so forth here in the United States. And there's obviously some repercussions globally that I want to kind of talk about. So that's why I kind of called it from school selection, because we're going to be doing so much of the whole entire admissions process, all the way to scrubbing your social media accounts, which is also a factor that nobody would have predicted is important today. It's going to be important. So let's get busy. We got a lot to cover. So let's get into it. So quick background, why I think I'm especially able to cover this material for you and especially well positioned to do so is because I am the founder and CEO of Right Track Admissions. I went to undergrad in Berkeley, in UCLA, did my law degree at Berkeley, did my first master's in Cambridge in England. So I have a bit of an international background as well. And my second master's in Harvard, where I got a full scholarship there at the Kennedy School. You can see me in the background right there in that image, where I was doing some kind of similar thing like TED Talks during my time there. Now, I founded Right Track in 2008 at the end of law school, but really gained the knowledge and the skills during my application cycle for undergrad and especially for law school, and obviously for graduate school as well. I guess I was proof in the pudding that I could use all the skills and learned things from my time doing Right Track to get into Harvard and get a full scholarship. So I'm clearly proof in the pudding that this is possible. And we've done this for thousands of clients over the last 17 years, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Regardless, based on my experiences during college, even though it was a million years away or years ago, I still was able to put together this really comprehensive college admissions guide that you're seeing right there, which is where a lot of this information today is going to be coming from. So hopefully you get an opportunity. I think at the end, we're going to be providing you with a code so that you can download it and get a discount to get access to this college admissions guide that really covers everything from whether and how to present yourself as the best candidate for college, what are alternatives to college, how to pick the right schools, the right major, when to apply, putting your application materials together, which we talked about in the last webinar, obviously telling your story and so forth. And of course, the process of submitting your application, what to do in terms of waitlists and deferrals, and then how to maximize your education. So some of those topics we're going to be covering today, but you can get all of them on the admissions guide itself. All right, let's continue. I'm going to try something here. Here we go. All right. So basically, these are common pain points that college candidates usually face. I want to kind of put this up front because we're going to be covering a lot of the topics today that students typically face difficulties, right? So confusion about the college admissions process, when to get started. Some people are saying, let's get started in September, let's get started October. Some people get started the October before. Some people get started 2 or 3 or even 4 Octobers before, like years before the college admissions process. So really, when should they get started? Figuring out what schools are the right fit, for them, because you don't want to go to a school, realize that it sucks for you, it's not working out, and in the end, you decide to transfer, or you just bomb out and you just end up not going to that program. or bailing out of that program, really, and not finishing your college degree. And we know a lot of people have done that in the past. Some luminaries that have done some great things later on, but obviously some other people that have not because they quit on that and they weren't able to get a college degree and obviously get incredible job opportunities. Difficulty creating and crafting a unique profile that really allows you to stand out as a student, your resume, all your essays and so forth. So I think in the end of the day, that pretty much is one of the main things, which is why we actually even ended up doing a whole webinar about it last time, because there's so many difficulties and hurdles that come into that. Balancing school with other responsibilities is a massive issue. Extracurriculars, familiar responsibilities, academics. So just so many factors that go into it, and some people just end up getting distracted and not completing the applications in time, or they do and they rush it, and then they end up in a situation which is also precarious. Figuring out how to pay for college in terms of scholarships, grants, loans, financial aid, all the other stuff. So these are some of the main pain points that people face. When to apply, which schools make the most sense, how to craft a unique profile that really allows them to go, to stand out, how to manage their time, and how to even fund their education are some of the main pain points. And we're going to cover some of those today. We also covered the one from last week. So make sure to hit us up and we can provide you with a video of that. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Here's something I wanted to kind of cover for you that I didn't have a chance to cover last time. I remembered I had this slide and I'm like, oops, this is such an important slide. Because what we did at Right Track is a lot of our clients often ask us, hey, how can we stand out as students, and what are colleges really looking for to stand out? Like, there's so many people applying. How do we stand out? And so we broke it down to these 6 C's, right? And what you'll see up there is what colleges really want to see: someone who's well-rounded with strong IQ, EQ, and AQ, which we spoke about last time, adaptability, quantum. Now, adaptability, quantum, emotional intelligence or emotional quantum basically are really an answer to and a survival mechanism in the age of AI. For until the foreseeable future, we're going to be dealing human with humans. Maybe in the future, most people will be dealing with robots, artificial intelligence, super intelligence, and so forth. But for at least the foreseeable future, we're dealing with humans, thank God. And in that capacity, there are certain skill sets you really want to build up, certain things you want to exercise, certain traits you want to really perfect. And that really comes down to your emotional intelligence and your adaptability intelligence. And these are 6 ways where these concepts kind of come together. Collaborative. So they're looking for someone who's collaborative, a team player, as well as a potential leader. That really falls into EQ, IQ, and AQ, because you've got to obviously adapt for the situation if you're a leader. EQ, you have to have emotional intelligence as a team player or as a leader. And IQ, because you have to have the intelligence to be able to do the tasks that are required. Okay? Capable. Here within capable, I was even toying with the idea of saying, should I call it capable? Should I call it critical thinker? But I just stuck with capable because part of capable is strong communication skills, which is super, super, super important. In fact, I always will say this. I recommend that for people to really stand out, especially in the age of AI, to be future ready, you want to have very strong communication skills, writing, reading, speaking, even though obviously people say, well, what's the point of being a better writer when AI writes everything for us? Because in the end of the day, if you ever have to write something on the fly, if you ever have to articulate, and writing is tied very closely with articulating and speaking and being a persuasive public speaker, you can't hide behind a computer and hope AI is going to save you. It will save you in emails when you're working from home asynchronistically, but when you're synchronistic and you're right there and you've got to speak, you've got to learn these traits. It's super, super important. So if anything from communication, if you don't want to double down on writing, then definitely you want to double down on oratory skills and being a great orator, somebody who can really convince people of things. And critical thinking is so important because what it is, it's telling you, listen, what we're not looking for is people who are hyper specialists, because a lot of specialties are being overtaken by AI. But what we're looking for is what they call neo-generalists, those people that have the ability to take a massive problem, break it down into bite sizes, analyze those aspects from a multi-dimensional perspective, and then put it all together again, reassemble it. And that's really where we can stand out as future ready employees, as future ready entrepreneurs and business leaders, is have that strong critical thinking. Compassion, obviously, empathy, that comes into EQ, right? And that's volunteer and community service. Creativity, which is extremely important for schools. And again, another aspect of how you can stand out in the age of AI and be future ready is approaching things from a creative perspective, thinking through problems, having certain multifaceted skills and hobbies. Also, that distinguishes you as an individual. If you're a virtuoso on the piano, that's something you can add because that requires skill. It requires a certain type of ear. It requires discipline. And people want that in their classroom. They want to have people who are multifaceted, who can really add to the conversation. Being committed, obviously extremely important. Having that strong work ethic and being reliable, that you can go the distance. Schools don't want to bring you into their campus if they think that you're going to bail out after a year, because you already took the position of someone else who would have completed the whole program. And so from that perspective, I think it's super important that schools are looking for people who are committed in their education, right? And finally, curious, probably one of the most important traits, something I very much uphold in my life. In fact, I have a kind of a channel, a travel vlog of sorts, and the motto is right there. You can see it. Oop, there it is. And you can say, stay curious, which is super important to me. To stay curious and be curious is such an important factor because it shows that you have an insatiable appetite to want to learn. And that is extremely important for schools. They want to see someone who's willing to adapt. That goes into AQ, right? Someone who's willing to want to learn other areas and learn from other people, to be curious, to ask questions, to be curious, to evolve. Right? And that's what schools look for. So keep these 6 factors in mind, because these really can help you inform how you set, your story up, your profile up, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we have a question here. Is being part of Mali United Nations a good thing to share, to let them know I'm well-rounded? Would that be to my advantage? Yes. Mali United Nations, great example, Anna. The idea here with MUN, I did MUN when I was in school in the Middle East. And we traveled to Holland as part of the Mali United Nations massive world conference. What that really is debate, right? So you've got to know how to debate. You've got to know how to write. You're dealing with real world problems that the UN usually deals with. Even if it's a mock situation. It teaches you teamwork. It teaches you leadership. It teaches you how to work well with other people who have maybe differentiating and differing ideas. So it's a absolutely excellent opportunity to really flex IQ, EQ, and AQ as a student in terms of extracurricular activities. All right, let's jump ahead. Now let's go into assembling your application. As I said, we talked about profiling and how to create the ideal profile for colleges and all that good stuff. You can get that in the other video, as well as getting the guidebook, as we really delve into what kind of extracurricular activities, like Anna just asked, should I do? How do you build your profile over multiple years? What alternatives do you have for college? What should you do in terms of a gap year, what we call the path year? So there's a lot there that we're not going to be covering today, but that you can get in the guidebook as well, and some things that we did cover in the last video. All right. So here are some things that we're going to be covering, or not covering, excuse me, but these are some of the things that are involved in the application process itself. School selections and major selection, right? And there's also minors to consider. Common application questions, right? You've got the school-specific essays and application questions themselves. So you've got the school selection. Once you figure that out, you've got the common application to complete. Then you've got the school-specific essays and the application questions to complete. You've got your resume to put together, or in the common application, you've got the what's called the activities section, I think, which is basically hones in on the kind of activities that you've done. Standardized testing. To be honest with you guys, I really, really feel a lot of schools are going to double down on standardized testing as a means, because I think essays are only going to end up being one aspect of the application, and standardized testing, as well as possibly interviewing, are going to be they're going to put more emphasis on those because that is something AI cannot help you with, unlike essays and putting your applications together, which it can. So they're really going to test you in that asynchronistic fashion that I talked about. Synchronistic fashion I talked about. Through the interviews, I think they're going to put more weight on that, and through exams, because again, you can't weasel out of that and get AI to help you. You've really got to focus on it and really master that skill. So I think the ACT and the SAT are going to be very central to the application process itself. Letters of recommendation, which we'll talk about today, financial aid and scholarships, which we'll talk about a little bit today, and the college interview process as well. So these are really the main factors. Once you select the school, you've got the common application, you've got the essays, the resume that you put together, standardized testing, LORs, financial aid, how you're going to pay for college, and then the interview process itself. And then I guess there would be another aspect, which is selecting the final school that you're going to be going to as well, which we'll cover today. All right. So picking the right school. Take a look at this. You kind of read the different factors that are going to be very important for you to kind of consider. This is not an exhaustive list, but it is still nonetheless a very important list for you to kind of consider. Okay. So you'll see there, you've got location. Is it going to be kind of in the countryside, or is it going to be dead smack in the city? Cornell versus NYU examples. Close or far from home. Again, if you live in like Los Angeles, do you want to go to UCLA? Or if you live in Los Angeles, would you prefer to go to Berkeley, or again, across the country and so forth? How hot, how cold the climate is. Some people care about climate. People who are susceptible to like SAD, right? Seasonal affect disorder, when it comes to your own temperament in colder climates. So that's going to be an important factor as well, right? That you want to consider in the process in terms of choosing. The size of the school, is it a big university like Texas A&M, or is it going to be a small private liberal arts school like Swarthmore or Amherst or something like that? Is there any specific programs that really stand out for the school that kind of align with what you want, right? Majors, level of competition from the academic side, reputation, top 10 programs, resources, what do they have? Tuition, financial aid, do they cover? Like Princeton covers a lot of tuition for students. Harvard does the same. Is that going to be the case? Or are you going to be going to a school which is going to be super expensive? That's going to really kind of put you through a lot of debt, or at least your parents do a lot of debt paying for you. Campus vibe, is it diverse? Is there a strong sports program? International students, Greek system, that kind of stuff, right? For fraternities and sororities. Network, is there a strong alumni network? Great. Is there a good faculty in terms of the expertise and accessibility? Or is there very few faculty for the number of students? Career development is super important, because is it going to provide you with opportunities to get great jobs afterwards or not? And that obviously factors into the quality of the school, where it's located, its network, its endowment, and so forth. So these are factors when picking the right university. What to avoid, as you see there, is relying on reputation alone. It's a Harvard or bust mentality. You don't get into Harvard, you don't go to school. That's a problem. I've had students who've applied to what you see right here, which is reach schools, target schools, and safety schools, where you can see the number of applications from 0 to, let's say 10, the number of schools, let's say hypothetically you'd be applying to. The bulk of the schools should be that you're applying to are the target schools. And here you can see the level of difficulty from 0 to 15, 40, 100%. So you can see here, the reach schools are ones between 0 and 15%, really hard to get into. Right? Target schools, 15 to 40%, slightly easier, but again, still competitive. And then you've got your safety schools. Reach schools could be your Ivy Leagues. Target schools could be your kind of like Ivy League Plus, which are kind of like your, if they call it that, UCLA, Berkeley, Georgetown, GW, USC, these kind of schools, right? In the 20s and 30s. And then the safety schools could be like your, run-of-the-mill state school. So if you do not diversify your application, right, you can end up in trouble, especially, again, if you rely only on reputation or rank alone, like Harvard or bust, and you only apply to reach schools, that could be massively problematic, right? And then you'd miss the mark and not get into a school, end up going to a community college, and then, who knows after that. Not visiting the campus, even doing a virtual tour, is a major problem. You really should do that. I always encourage parents to take their kids even as early as 10th grade so that they can start seeing campuses and getting really jazzed up about the process. Applying because of a certain major or professor, that you may end up in that school and then suddenly realize that you don't want to do that major and then end up, in trouble because now you want to switch majors and the major that you switched into is not that great because the one you really wanted is the one that now is no longer really kind of available because you're not interested in, and the one that you really want, sorry, is not available because the school may not have it or it may not be their strong suit. Attending only for financial aid. A lot of people, we talk about this. I've asked a lot of admissions consultants, admissions experts, obviously students, and I think the common, it really cuts both ways, but going to a top program without a lot of money versus going to a middle of the road or safety school, but with financial aid could really, I think, be detrimental. If you go to a safety school with financial aid versus like going to a top tier program like a Reach school, I think it'd be problematic because I think once you start the program, we'll talk about this and I'll show myself as an example, you can always find financial aid when you start the program. Plus, there's a higher chance that you're going to get better jobs, meet, better professors, have a better network of people that could help catapult your career and earn more money in your jobs, afterwards, than you would if you went to a lower tier school, which may tie you to that region, which you may want to leave. And then if you leave with a local school, like a local state school, you may not have the ability to get jobs in another state. Following others, like your family and friends, legacy and so forth is not good at all because again, you are not your father, you're not your mother, you're not your best friend. You really want to carve your own path to figure out where you want to go. So those are my avoids in selecting schools because otherwise you can really kind of end up in a situation where you don't like the school, you don't like the program, you don't like where you ended up, and then now you're trying to transfer, which may or may not happen, and it's just a horrible experience. And you're talking 4 years of your most formative years. All right. What to ask for on your college tour. So when you do the college tour, here are some things to kind of think about. How big are the class sizes? What's the residential life on campus? Do you have certain student groups? What are the academic vibes like on campus, right? What is the area like? Fun activities. Like I started off at Santa Barbara and then transferred to UCLA. Santa Barbara wasn't kind of my schlick. That's why I speak a lot from experience. I went to Santa Barbara. My sister was there at the time. And I learned that, actually when she graduated, I was like, what am I still doing here? And so I decided to apply to UCLA and I transferred and got in and carved my own path. And I think that was very important and important for me to kind of realize. And UCLA, being in Los Angeles, is more my vibe. That's where I am now. And now has been a big part of my life. Visiting campuses, there's some things to kind of note there. I'm not going to get into all of them, but again, research, ask questions, audit classes if you can, engage with students, write down people's names, keep kind of an account of all the real facts because you can write about it in your application essay to really show how committed you are to that school. And don't make a judgment immediately when you get there. You may get there and the weather sucks or there's a lot of traffic on a given day that is an aberration to the norm, or somebody may not be very nice to you while you're there, and you can't be like, oh yeah, the people suck. You're like, dude, you're talking about 20,000 people. Just one person was not nice to you doesn't mean that everyone's not nice to you. So, don't throw it off on first immediate impressions. Do your diligence and then kind of figure out where you kind of want to be. And like I said, note the names of people and anything on campus, off-campus references in your application. So write it down while you're visiting so that you can reference it later in case you forget. All right. Woo! Tons going on here. The only reason I'm bringing this up, the Canadian schools and the British schools after that, is because obviously what's happening in the US right now, especially with international students. So I want to give you guys some options. Canadian schools have helped a lot of people with their applications here to Canadian schools. I don't know much about it personally because I didn't go to Canadian schools, but we've helped a lot of clients, especially into UT and McGill and so forth. So there are some things that are really advantageous to be in Canada. Typically, they're cheaper than American schools, as you can see, easier typically to get a visa. And now we know, obviously, especially given all the political turmoil and climate, which we'll talk about later. There's more, for example, an emphasis on your latter 2 years than all 4 years. Let's see. The work permit is easier. in Canada, potentially, than the OPT, which is, again, another problem that we're not 100% sure of how it's going to pan out there. The problem with Canada, obviously, there's just not that much of a huge selection that can go toe to toe with American schools. McGill, Toronto being some of the few really outstanding schools that can go toe to toe with some of the top American schools. University of British Columbia as well. I don't want to be biased, but again, I think in the end of the day, they don't compare. There's only 30 million Canadians or 40 million Canadians compared to 360 million Americans. So obviously there's going to be better, more variety of top tier schools in the US. But this is something I want to kind of put together here for you to kind of think about, especially given the political climate and having alternatives to US education. And the same for the UK. I did go to the UK, as I mentioned. I did go to University of Cambridge to do my master's, and I went to a British international school growing up from 10 to 18. So I'm very familiar with the British system, as are a lot of my experts at Right Track. There's pros and cons. I'm a huge believer that the US schools probably are better, again, in my opinion. Undergraduate degrees are 3 years versus 4 in the US. You can earn a master's in the 4th year, while in the US, obviously, as you know, it will be 4+1 or 4+2. Even DPhils or PhDs, you can get them faster in the UK. So that's a massive advantage. Typically lower tuition than in the US, massive advantage there. Their ability to get a visa afterwards to experience and get work opportunities are really, really great compared, again, to the US. There's some incredible universities better than the US. Cambridge, Oxford, right? They created the university system, the Western university system. Harvard obviously is based after Cambridge, as you guys may know. London School of Economics, SOAS, University College London, University of Edinburgh, University of Manchester, Durham, Bath. I mean, there's so many great schools in the UK. Imperial College. So that one, again, bigger population, much older education system. So you're going to get some great options there. But again, there's restrictions in terms of the style of education. There also, I think a massive factor I'd like to mention is that, and you would probably, I assume you'd know this if you're applying to UK universities, but you pretty much have to know your major from the jump. You can't kind of go in there and do the general education opportunities that you get in the United States to try different classes and different fields and then choose a major or hunker down on a major. In the UK, once you go in, that's it. You're doing that from the jump all the way to the end. And you're really assessed towards the end of your academic year, even though you get graded each year, but your first, second, 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, all that stuff. Grading system really comes towards the end of your academic career, which to me seems kind of ludicrous, especially I think given the age of AI, where now I think testing will be done not even during midterms and finals, but probably assessments throughout your academic experience, like weekly quizzes and so forth, are going to be much easier to assess and much easier to administer for the teacher and the teaching assistants. All right. There's no questions on that. We'll jump ahead. Here's how to select the ideal major. It's a lot going on here. I know I'm covering a hell of a lot of information, but I kind of want to put this out there. 1 in 3 people change their majors at least once during their, again, I'm going to talk about U.S. colleges here, U.S. college career. I didn't change my major. I had history as my major, but I added poli-sci as my minor because I was taking so many classes in poli-sci that I ended up just saying, you know what, I'm going to use my last, I think 1 or 2 quarters just to take the remaining poli-sci classes I needed to take so that I could get the minor. Not that it made a massive difference in my career because I ended up doing studied law, but I did do policy, master's in public administration and policy, international relations. That came probably from my learnings in political science. So some of the things that you want to consider, your passion. I know that sounds like a really foo-foo term because what the hell is passion? It's the kind of things, to me, it's kind of, if you could say this, and this is hard, I don't know if you guys remember, I may have mentioned this as an essay among the UC application insight questions. But one of the things that, in terms of passion, is like, what puts you in that zone, that kind of superhuman zone where everything kind of gets blurry and blocked out and you lose track of time? Is there a major? Is there something that you end up reading a lot of or seeing a lot of or listening to a lot of podcasts or really hunkering in and just like you lose track of time? If that's the case, that's probably your passion. That's your primal interest. That's something that you really are going to be able to develop a superpower in, where somebody else will be like, wow, you really like this that much? I couldn't care less about it. Then you know you've got something where a lot of people may not have that same interest, and you could really develop that kind of, you can hone in on it. I'm not saying develop a myopic expertise, because I still want you to be well rounded, but you can develop a expertise that you can then use to kind of pivot from and expand to, those transferable skills. And that's what kind of history and poli sci did for me. It really allowed me to be a critical thinker, allowed me to be a great, writer. I think so, a good public speaker, because I was able to do that through those majors. Career prep. What major will best help you explore and prepare for grad school and or embark on your career path? There's some people that don't have a choice, like if you want to go to med school. So you're going to have to end up doing certain classes like pre-med, or to be an engineer, you have to take obviously a lot of engineering classes. If you want to be an accountant, you got to take a lot of accounting classes. You can't go in like me in history and then go into law where nothing applies in terms of history. And I can do that, right? In accounting, if you want to be an accountant, you probably should major in accounting. If you want to be an engineer, you probably want to focus on taking and getting a degree in engineering. So that's something to think about, your career prep. Earning potential. Some people don't care that much about money. Some people care a whole lot about money. And so that could be a huge motivator. So you want to pick a career that's going to be able to remunerate you well. Things like, if you decide to go into law and go the distance, that could be very financially well compensated. Certain business fields, obviously medical fields and so forth. And then job demand. This is very important with the AI, with the age of AI, GAI, generative AI, automated world, all these things. Like, how are you going to be future ready? How are you going to prepare yourself? And you don't want to do a major that's really going to become obsolete and irrelevant down the road. You want to pick something that really makes sense. And there's a lot of reports on this. Like, anything that is deemed clerical, anything that's deemed repetitive is obviously going to be automatable. Even law, in some instances, I have to say, is going to be AI supported, right? Versus things that really require that you are very front facing and dealing with people, making you a very critical thinker, someone that people need to trust and confide in. These are areas that are going to be very important to make you future ready. So keep that in mind, because that's very, very important. I have people that come to me like, I really want to do architecture. Yes, architecture is going to still be important. Yes, you're going to need humans in the loop for architecture. But if you had 100 architecture jobs, I'm almost confident that half of them will disappear probably in the next 5 to 10 years because of AI. Because, we thought CAD was going to change architecture, and I'm sure it completely upended the industry, right? As a software. I think now with AI, it's going to be even more amplified in a crazy way. So something to kind of keep in mind. Undecided. Not a big fan of this unless you are a virtuoso across the board. Then you can kind of go in undecided, because the school will be like, well, this person's great at science and great at math and great at, the humanities. So it makes sense for them to be undecided, because we would admit them to any of these programs. Okay. Not many people can say that. So I would say pick one field and jump in it and really create your profile around it. Minors and majors, we already spoke about that. You can take multiple majors. I've known people that have done 3 majors. I've known people that have done major and 2 minors. As I said, did a minor and considered others. So that also is an option for you. All right. Resume writing. Some things to think about here. When doing your resume, not in terms of the Common App resume, but just in a general resume format. Here's how I would divide it up. Start with your education activities, because you don't have a lot of professional experience because you're in high school. So start with education activities in the first section. Second section, professional experiences, if applicable, internships, things like that. But focus on job responsibilities, focus on achievements, and things like that. Less like measurable results, less what you did and more what you did, what impact did it have, right? How many people did you work with? Did you take on any leadership roles? Did you move the needle? Was there a KPI, like a key performance indicator, that you met? That's kind of what schools want to look for, not just what you did. Volunteer experience is super important, especially leadership and impact. We talked about that. Extracurriculars, again, emphasizing leadership and teamwork and impact. Interests and skills, what makes you unique and varied, right? And then finally, any other sections. If you have a ton of publications, put them in their own section. Certificates and licenses, put them in their own section. Speaking engagements, put in their own section. I would put that before interests and skills. I would always end with interests and skills as the last section. So that's kind of how I would divide up a resume. We've done this for college, we've done this for graduate school, and we've done this less to a degree. We kind of change it up for professional resumes. We kind of change it up slightly. But this is really a surefire way to kind of excel in terms of how to stand out on your resume. All right, letters of rec. So in terms of letters of rec, let's see what we got. You should supplement your application subjective. So this is kind of more of a subjective assessment of your profile rather than purely objective. Subjective from somebody else's perspective that serves to reinforce how great you are and kind of substantiates what you've already written in the application, right? So that's really what it is and why it's important. When to do, you should really request it at least 2 to 3 months ahead of time. You don't want to be in a position of asking the person kind of close to the deadline. They feel disrespected because you're not respecting their time and end up writing a sloppy letter of recommendation. So that's something to kind of think about. Obviously, be courteous to your recommender, in terms of that timely submission. So you want to kind of be on them, but not too much on them in terms of getting it done. But that's why you want to give them a heads up so that they can finish it and have plenty of time to piece it together. Consider asking an academic person for some college programs. You may have to have both of them to be academic if you have 2 recommendations. If you get 3, I typically say 2 academic and maybe 1 that could be extracurricular, as you see there, like a coach, a club advisor. Professional, if you have that opportunity as well to kind of show your maturity, your sense of discipline, your work ethic, all that kind of stuff. Current students, that could be a supplement, that could be a 4th letter if they allow that. An alum or student from that school that can say, listen, I went to that school. I know what you guys need. This person's outstanding. I can vouch for them. I think they'd be a great addition to the school. Who not to ask, don't ask a family, friend, or coworker, especially someone on your level or below you in terms of hierarchy in the organization, because it could really affect the veracity. It could be deemed to be bias because a family is not going to screw you, a friend is not going to write a bad letter for you, and a coworker who's on your same level or below in the hierarchy would feel compelled to write it because they're worried about their job. So just something to keep in mind. Don't ask somebody you're not 100% sure will support you. You want to have the absolute best advocate for you, cheerleader, somebody who really has your back. And don't ask a VIP over someone who knows you well. Like, let's say, asking your principal versus your English teacher, simply because one is a principal and one's an English teacher. If the principal doesn't know you and they're going to write probably a letter that they're going to just probably put through ChatGPT with a couple of bullet points, it's going to be some, gibberish that's inauthentic. Not worth it. Go to the English teacher who knows you well, who's seen your development, who can really vouch for you. Obviously, if the VIP knows you extremely well, go to them. But if they don't know you, go to somebody who knows you very well and will really have your back. And then how to do it: ask in person if possible. Follow up with an email. Say thank you so much. Let me know if there's any questions. Maybe like a month before it's due, double check in. 2 weeks before it's due, if you haven't seen it, maybe check in again. Obviously, the week before, check in again. And then I'll tell you this: if you haven't heard back from that person 3 weeks before it's due, start looking for an alternative. So on your list, you should probably pick your top 2, and then you should have 1 that's a third, and then 1 or 2 that's an alternate, just in case everything kind of falls through. Oh yeah, and then I talked about a brag sheet, which I think is important to kind of put down what you top things that you want them to kind of mention in the letter of recommendation so that it could really stand out so that they can incorporate it. Anna, who seems the zealous Anna, has asked us, should I ask teachers from my junior, senior, or earlier? Great question, Anna. If you've got a teacher from your junior, I think that's going to be the most important, because your senior year, you're probably only going to have a couple of months of them before they submit the letter of recommendation. So unless that person taught you in the junior year and senior year, then go with them. But you want to have someone the best is someone who knows you over a period of, let's say, a year, that can say, when they first started with me, they were here, but now after they completed the year with me, they're here. They've really evolved. They're incredible, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously have them go back to that thing that we talked about, those 6 C's, so that they can make sure that some of those things are surfaced. I mean, that's really what you want the people to do in your recommendations, is to really kind of talk about those key qualities that the school is looking for. All right. So I think hopefully that helps you. Is I wouldn't go as far back as freshman year, Anna. I would go as the latest I'd go back is towards the end of sophomore year, definitely in your junior year, and not, obviously not in your senior year if you just met the professor. All right. Standardized testing. I don't want to get too deep into this. You could probably chat GPT and figure out the differences between ACT and SATs, but this is just some kind of things to think about. I've heard that the ACT is a lot easier. I think schools typically weigh them the same, though SATs have always been the gold standard. Um, they're both offered multiple times globally. They're both around the same price, from what I understand, unless that's changed recently. They're both around the same time. The scores are just different. And I think the SAT, for whatever reason, I've heard maybe is less intuitive and it's harder. So if you can do the SAT and crush it, and you do really well in the ACT, I would definitely submit the SAT score and focus on that one. All right, financial aid. A couple of quick things here. Free money. That's your need-based university aid. I know Harvard gives a lot of university aid. I think Princeton gives a lot of university aid. So some universities give that. That typically is just need-based and it's free, unless your need-based status changes. Your parents win the lottery, and when you submit your FAFSA, suddenly show you're a millionaire. Then obviously it would be cut. But typically, need-based aid is you're going to pretty much be in the same financial situation in 4 years. And I don't think typically it's predicated. It's just predicated on taking how many units, less so about the grades. So I call it free funds because you're getting it for free without any strings attached. Typically, you got grants and state, federal funding, which is what I got a lot of. And then you've got government funding as well. Then you've got your funds with requirements, maybe like local communities that are giving it to you that require that you go back and work with them or what have you. Scholarships, you've got the private ones, you've got like the Gates Scholarship, Athletic Scholarship. You even have scholarships from employers who are going to require that you come back and work with them. And I'm telling you this, financial aid, this is not when you first start at the school. This could also be money that you earn during your time as a student. You could find other government funding, find local organizations in your sophomore or junior year. So it's not necessary that that's going to that you if you enter college, that's the money that you're going to have throughout college. There's funds that require repayment, subsidized, unsubsidized loans. Subsidized meaning that they cover the interest rate during your time as a student. Unsubsidized means that you're going to be covering the interest rate during your time as a student. So, and that can make a big difference, especially if your interest rate is high, like 5, 6, 7%, and you got to start covering that from the jump. That could really add up quick. And then other things to consider: funding as a student, work study. I didn't do a lot of this. I did more summer internships, but you can work as a student. They will give you the opportunity. Getting money from your family, obviously, either for repayment or just even gratuitously. A lot of parents put together, not trusts, but they put together funds for students, their kids, so that they could use those funds. They accrue them over the course of the child's age, up to the age of 18, and then they can actually use it for college admissions. And then that fund is invested, I assume, so that you can make money over time, so that you have enough money, 100, 2, 3, $400,000 to pay for your education. And then negotiating funding. Let's say you get into USC and UCLA, which are almost ranked the same. Sadly, I'm a Bruin. But the idea here is that, let's just say USC gave you $10,000. UCLA gave you nothing. You can go to UCLA and say, listen, I really want to come to your school. USC, sweeten the pot by giving me 10. Is there any way you can match it? They may match it. You go back to USC, tell them, listen, UCLA gave me 10. Can you do better than 10? I know that's what you gave me. They may say, yes, we really want you. And then you can kind of go back and forth until you tap out. But do that. I think that's a great opportunity. Obviously, if you start getting the sense, I don't think anybody's going to withdraw your financial aid if you negotiate. A couple of quick things here. For me, I did in-school internships. I did summer jobs. And then the last year of college, my GPA was great. It was over 3.9. So I went to them and said, listen, I'm not getting any merit-based funding for my academic grades, is there any way that I could apply to one, especially I'm in the honors department? They said, go check out this binder. We've got a bunch of scholarships that you may qualify for there. At the time, this was 1,000 years ago, so we didn't have it on computer for whatever reason. They hadn't digitized it. So I went through the binder, found 3 or 4, applied to all of them, got 2 of them, and I had more than enough money plus a profit by the time I graduated because I was able to get financial aid in my last year. So that shows 2 things: being resourceful and recognizing that you could still get financial aid, despite not getting it when you first start school, which is why it's so important that you don't go to a school simply for the financial aid package. Because when you start at Harvard or Columbia, let's say, and it costs a fortune, maybe after your first year, you end up doing really well and can get financial aid from the school, need-based or merit-based scholarships. And then you're going to regret saying, damn, I could have gone to UPenn, but I ended up going to, I don't know, some other school simply because I didn't know I can afford it. And now I found out, like, friends of mine were able to do it. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Always try to go to the best school you possibly can. All right, submitting your applications. I'm going to blitz through this because we're slowly winding down on time. Let's see. Oh, I think I got another question from Anna. What's the best way to ask for a letter of recommendation? In person, by email? And you remember, Anna, I said, and this is only if you can do this, do it in person. That way they put a face to the name, especially if it's been like a year since you've taken their class. So, try to do that. I would say get a face to the name so they can remember you. So do it in person. If you can't reach it for whatever reason, start with an email. Maybe the email actually says, can I meet you in person? You could do it that way as well. But if you can, do it in person. It's always better that way. All right. Submitting your application. A couple of quick things to think about: early decision, early action, regular decision. Early decision. The advantage here is that you have a higher chance of admission. Disadvantage, you have to apply earlier. So if you don't have a great application ready to rock and roll, and you're quickly stumbling to put one together, that could put you at a disadvantage. Maybe it's better to apply later. In some cases, financial aid, once you are admitted, you have to go. You can't really negotiate between schools because you're going to do ED. You can only do ED to one school, and you got to go to that school. Right? And I said that you can't apply it to more than one ED school, but you can apply to one ED school and a bunch of regular decision or even early admissions, but not other ED schools. And the point is you can't negotiate because once you get admitted to the ED, even if you got into a regular decision school, you got to go to the ED school because you pretty much said, I will forego any other school for your school. Also, something else I want you to think about too is think about who's applying to it. People probably that have a very strong connection to the school, people that have very good grades, people that probably have a very good reason to go to that school. And so if you don't have a great reason and you haven't really established that connection to that school, that could be detrimental to you. Early action is kind of where I love, especially if you can put your application early enough, because you get to find out earlier. You can still negotiate your financial aid package. Let's see what else. It's less stressful because you can finish earlier by submitting your application earlier and just focus on your academics, and you'll get an earlier notification in the process. The problems with it is, maybe there's less financial aid opportunities, higher requirements for the SATs, because again, you're applying early action. It's non-binding, so a lot of people are going to be using that. So you really need to stand out, and you really need to show a connection to that school. If you don't, then that could be a disadvantage to you. Regular decision is obviously the counter opposite of most of what I've spoken about. Another good thing about early decision, early action is that you can get waitlisted and or deferred, and you get 2 bites at the apple. If you get waitlisted, they could push you into the regular admissions pile. If you get deferred, they can also push you into the regular admissions pile, and then you could reapply, especially if you got deferred. And even if you get dinged in early decision, you could be dinged in early decision, not completely kicked out, but put into the regular decision group as well. So that's another advantage to that. Submission pro tips. Don't want to delve too deep into this, but before you do, proofread. Super important to make sure that all your grammar, everything is on point. There's no mistakes. I would always say submit earlier than later, but not rushed. But submit earlier, especially for rolling admission in the regular decision pile. Ensure all your materials are up to date. Don't submit like a draft of a statement or an essay and that you forgot to update. So make sure that you have all the updated information and then address any issues. And that's the great advantage of applying early, because if it's well before the deadline, they can be like, hey, listen, we got your application, we start processing it, but we realized we're missing a letter of recommendation, or we're missing X, or you need to clarify why. Then it gives you an opportunity to do that. Post submissions, keep active. Just in case you're waitlisted, you want to flex what you've been doing since. Prepare for the interview. We'll talk a little bit about the interview. Again, if you're going to take the SAT, potentially you can retake it and submit it and say, listen, I retook it. I'm submitting it to you. It could be a Hail Mary. The school would be like, listen, sorry, we're not going to accept it. Or they could say, okay, we're not going to accept it, but we're going to look at it, and it could just be persuasive to us. Any new term grades are going to be important. So you want to update your transcript, and then follow up with them if you haven't heard back, especially around March or April, so that you can, so just in case you haven't heard from them, and then you can tell them, listen, I've heard from this school, I haven't heard from your school. Please tell me where I stand. You don't want to kind of leave it to the last minute, and then you don't hear back until June, and they already had an answer for you, or you didn't know, or you missed the email that you were put on the wait list or deferred or what have you. All right. A couple of things I want to quickly mention about the interview process. There's tons going on here. We have a whole chapter on the interview process, so make sure, I think it's chapter 14 of the guidebook. So tons going on here, but I want you to just think about these things. Number one, know yourself, know the school, and then know your interviewer. Those are the key kind of buckets that you want to use to prepare for the for the interviews. And when you're kind of putting this together and really the preparation approach, number one, I say, is prepare from the 6 Ps. Yep, I like the number 6, and I like these kind of approaches to remembering what to do. Under prepare, here are some things that you really want to do to prepare for the interview. Research past questions. Think about the application, review all the application materials, research the school in depth, right? Know your school. Speak with current students or alum. That's also going to help you with know your school, know yourself, because you can also talk about that and how it connects with you. Review those hot button topics in the school. That also helps know your school. Prepare questions for the interviewer, right? That's getting to know your interviewer. And then obviously practice. So this helps you with know yourself. This helps you with know the school. This helps you with know your interviewer, right? And then practice, which is always going to be very important for the preparation process. Be presentable. Don't dress crazy unless you're applying to like Parsons or some artsy school. Then maybe, be yourself and so forth. But typically you want to, be formal. Maybe not too formal with a suit, but at least something that looks like business casual, so that you can, show that you respect the admissions process and you respect their time. Be punctual. Obviously, you don't want to be in a situation where you're kind of scrambling, coming in, sweating into a call or into the actual interview. Some people do this in person. So you want to be punctual. Be professional. Don't use profanity, swearing, and kind of, using slang too much, but be professional. But in the meantime, also be yourself. So be personable. You want the person to fall in love with you and not necessarily feel that you're a stiff or a square, but somebody that's, personable, somebody that they can talk to. They always say, you want the person that's going to be in your school from an interviewer's perspective, that's someone that you would be willing to go get a coffee with, right? So you want to be personable enough so that you want to win their trust, confidence, and, they like you. And then finally, be polite, which is by sending an email, thanking them for their time, maybe referencing something that was said during the interview so that they kind of create that connection with you. All right. Now, how do colleges evaluate the candidates? I tried my best to create the circles in terms of importance. Who decides it? Typically, it's going to be the director of admissions, faculty, and admission staff. And in some cases, even the students and the alum have a say, especially the alum when it comes to the interview process. I think GPA in courses, SATs are going to be the most important aspect of your whole application. Recommendations are also going to be extremely important because again, they're subjective from an outsider's perspective. But the GPA and SAT are things that AI won't impact. Then you've got your application materials, which is, obviously important because that's really where you can kind of describe yourself. There's also the interview, which I think is going to become more and more important over time. Demonstrated interest in the school, kind of showing your connection to the school. And finally, your personal profile, which is becoming slightly less and less important because of the impact of DEI and the watering down of diversity. But still, the personal profile, add that to the application materials because that's going to be important to kind of show why you're unique and why they would want you in that school. All right. That's just something to kind of think about how colleges evaluate candidates. What will happen? Either get denied, where you can try a letter of appeal, but short of a clerical error, usually letters of appeal are denied. You can get deferred or waitlisted. If you're deferred, you can go from like maybe ED or EA to the regular decision, and then then they'll reevaluate your application. Or you're waitlisted, and then you provide a letter of continued interest, which we talk about in the guidebook, where you really want to talk about the school. You really want to talk about what you've been doing since you applied, and then talk about the school and why you really are a great fit for the school and how it's really going to help you in your life. If you get accepted, great. You want to evaluate your offer based a lot on why you picked the school. So you go back to that initial slide where we talked about the size, the climate, the school environment, the faculty, the academics, all that stuff. You kind of want to reevaluate all of that. And you kind of want to figure out, don't accept immediately because you may want to negotiate your financial aid package like we talked about. All right. Couple of things for the checklist for students. I'm not going to talk too much about this, except I'm going to say, you can see some of the things that you got to do as an international student. Like, for example, your GPA verification, your letters of recommendation, if they need to be translated, English proficiency exams, the TOEFL, the IELTS, those kind of things. But what I really want to kind of get into also is the visa application. This is becoming a big, big factor. Especially now, especially in the US. And that's really kind of where it will go into here, which is what we call the politics of the college admissions process. Like, what do you need to know? Here, for US students, race-conscious admissions got struck down by the US Supreme Court like 2 years ago. And now the Department of Education are really enforcing stricter bans on race-based admissions. And a lot of schools are risking losing financial aid, federal and state funding, especially if they're state schools, if they don't comply with these new rules. Why that's important? It's important, obviously, because DEI and how you approach your diversity statement, which we talked about in the last webinar, is going to be important, right? And it could impact your choice of schools, can impact the financial aid you're going to get. So you really want to be ahead of that, because that's part of the admissions process, and it's becoming a political issue. So that's why I called it the politics of the U.S. college admissions. For the international students, you want to ensure that your digital presence aligns with your application values. We're going to quickly talk about scrubbing your social media. Apply early and track your deadlines. Guys, you have to have a letter of admissions, which is sometimes why it's important to even apply ED or EA, because as soon as you get that letter of admissions, you can apply for the visa. What would suck is if you applied to a bunch of schools, you got waitlisted, and you finally got off the waitlist in May, and then you ran to the embassy with your letter of acceptance, and now it's like almost June, and then you're hoping to get your visa in time, especially with what's going on now, in time for the school admissions in September. So it becomes very precarious. You really want to apply as early as possible, get in as early as possible, so you have that admissions letter. Also, something else that I want to kind of let you know is you can get into one school, I think it's the I-90, and then what would happen is if you then got waitlisted and got into another school, you can ask the initial school that wrote your request for a visa, especially if they're part of the SEVP program, they granted you they wrote your visa requirement letter. You went to the embassy, you got the visa for that school, and then what you can do is they can transfer your visa to the other school if you got into another one. So don't worry about that. You can get in somewhere, let's say in March, you get the visa in April, May, and let's say in June, you get into another school that you really want to go to. You can get that initial school to transfer it over. Just something to kind of think about. I give you guys some helpful tracking tools there. U.S. Department of Education, hopefully before they shutter it, hopefully they won't shutter it, but it still works, and it has a ton of great information. Higher Education is a chronicle, which has a ton of great stuff on it. U.S. Department of State for visa, you can get it right from the horse's mouth. NAFSA, which is kind of like the National Association of Financial, or something about student association, something to that effect, will also give you a lot of information there. And then the Visa Bulletin Board from the USCIS. So you can get a lot of information. Both the USCIS and Department of Education and the State Department are all government institutions. So they'll be able to give you a lot of up-to-date information as it pans out. And here's kind of what you want to think about in terms of scrubbing your accounts. First thing is update your bio and your profile. Don't have stuff in there that can really become problematic. I think that's very, very kind of important from that perspective. Also, change it. So if you have a crazy picture or something like this looks weird, or you have a weird name or a weird profile bio information, update it, make it, scrub it so that it's less controversial and it's professional. Delete any kind of controversial or inconsistent content. That's important. So just go in there and delete it. Review your likes, comments, and things. But let me actually quickly add this: like, what is controversial? Anything that really kind of goes against the government, anything that kind of talks badly of other identity groups and so forth. Anything that could be controversial that schools will just deem to say, if we have it between two candidates and we got this, we're not going to like that person. Because again, schools have the right to view your social media just like the government does. So the government may be like, hey, this person's outstanding. I love them. They like guns, whatever it is. I don't know. But the school may say, you know what, this person's talking about guns the whole time. We are not interested and having somebody like that. So just certain things are divisive, controversial. If you can, delete them. Review your likes, comments, and follows. And I say that because there's other accounts that you may be getting a lot of likes from that may be controversial, racist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, people that, I don't know, there's so many bad actors out there. And so you want to be careful from having anybody comment or follow that. And you can go through your account. I know it sucks, but you definitely want to scrub it accordingly. Download or review your data. You can also do that. Download your data. Take a look at it, because you may have forgotten about some of your past data. You could do that through some of these third-party apps like Sprout Social or Talkwalker, so that you can also kind of see what exists in your profile and then quickly go into that exact message or comment or whatever and delete it. Delete or privatize old accounts. I wouldn't even privatize it. I would just delete it. It's just not worth it, because they could maybe find out privatized accounts, even though you're meant to put everything into public. Who knows? Somebody may refer to an account that you had that now is private, and then they could be like, we want to see this private account because somebody referred to it. This last one, use an alias for non-essential accounts. Some people have advised that from people we follow. I would say I would err on the side of not doing that, even though you can, which basically means just changing your name and then saying I have nothing to do with it because my name is not affiliated with it. But I think it's still problematic, especially if it's public, because they could track it down and find it. Okay. A lot of this stuff is going to be done through AI. They've got a ton of AI crawlers that will be able to crawl through your stuff. And then ultimately it's to the consulate and the consular office, whether they accept you or deny you. So err on the side of caution. All right. Quickly blitzing through the timeline. Summer activities. You definitely want to double down and do certain things that you're going to be able to talk about in your application. Standardized testing, sign up for it, and then be prepared to take it early, not later, so that you can take it multiple times if needed. Selecting your major and your college's application preparation, which we talk about as well between June and December. Your transcripts, getting those together, especially if you're international. Submitting around October to December. I wouldn't submit after Christmas. Financial aid, obviously, think of it like a full-time job, because you're going to be getting money from somewhere. So it's super important that you have done your research to find every opportunity available. Visas, as I said, hopefully if you get an acceptance as early as October, rush to the embassy so you can get it done as fast as possible. Who knows how long this is going to take. Housing, obviously an important factor. You can start thinking about it as early as the end of December and through the spring. And then your final decision usually is between March and May, right? Where you're going to make your deposit, secure your housing, go to orientation. So that's kind of a timeline of the whole application cycle. And lastly, maximizing college. I would love to go into this, but we're really late in the game. So I want you guys to get my college admissions mastery guide, because that is going to have a huge section on these things, which I call slash, to really stand out and maximize your educational experience. Who we are, this is the team, super diverse, super, super accomplished, infinitely smarter than me, an incredibly experienced, just unbelievable group of talented individuals. I've gone to some of the top schools like Chicago, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, NYU, Wharton, UPenn. So really, really sharp people. We've gotten people into some of these top programs. You mentioned UT from before, Cambridge, Oxford, Harvard, Duke, ton of top programs over the last 17 years. I can't believe I've been doing this for 17 years, but I love it. And finally, Just want to kind of sign off by telling you guys thank you. I know we went over by a couple of minutes, but check out our mastery guide. We'll give you 25% off if you contact us in the next 24 hours. We have the mastery checklist in there. It's a guide and a course. So you'll also have me talking in depth about everything we spoke about today. Guys, make sure to ask any questions you have. Send us emails. You guys have my email right there, info@Right Track Admissions. Feel free to call us. We would really love to work with you and really guide you through the process. One last question. As an international student, what happens with ED? How binding is it? Super binding, because they could still go after you in your high school and report you and say, this person applied ED and they did not adhere to it. And the school will come down really hard on you because they don't want that university to look badly and unfavorably on future applicants from that high school. So they will hold you, they'll hold your foot to the fire. You really got to adhere to that unless there's a really extenuating circumstance as to why you're not going to that school. All right, my friends, I look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thank you for watching, and stay safe and stay curious. Take care.